Okay, so just a couple reminders. Please, since this is an official open meeting, please do not use the chat. If you have to say anything, you can either use the raise hand function if you're finding it hard to like unmute and talk. We'll try to keep it as organized as possible. I do ask that when you are not talking that you please mute your microphone just so that we don't accidentally get a ton of feedback. So with that, I will ask Beth to do roll call.
I will do roll call by library name. If you could please say your first and last name just to make sure we have everyone listed correctly. Algonquin.
Sarah Murray.
Carrie.
Diane McNulty.
Crystal Lake.
Catherine Martins.
Displain.
Joe Bonell.
Ela.
Erica Christensen.
Evanston.
Tim Longo.
Fox River Valley. Fox River Valley. Fremont.
Got Davis here.
Glencoe.
Andy Kim.
Glenview.
Harry Room.
Grays Lake.
Sarah Brown.
Highland Park. Chad, are you there? Maybe you're on mute. There we go. Got the thumbs up. Huntley.
Frank Novak.
Indian Trails.
Brian Shepard.
Lake Forest.
Catherine Lemmer.
Lake Villa.
Nick Jacobson.
Lincolnwood. Lincolnwood. McHenry. McHenry. Morden Grove.
Pam Leffler.
Niles.
Susan Lemke.
Northbrook.
Kate Hall.
Palatine.
Jeannie Dilcher.
Park Ridge.
Heidi Smith.
Prospect Heights.
Alex Big Slick Todd.
Round Lake. Round Lake. Wilmette.
Anthony Austin.
Winnetka.
Emily Compton Zach.
Zion.
Molly Brumbaugh.
Also present, Rebecca Malinowski, Beth Stoneburner, CCS.
And do we have any guests on the call? If there are, please introduce yourself.
Yes. Scott Herod.
Great, thank you very much.
Kate,
I think
try again for any libraries that may have joined or that I missed. I'll try again for Fox River Valley, Lincolnwood, McHenry, and Round Lake. Thank you.
all right, wonderful. Do we have any additions to the agenda today? All right, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Please state your name when you make the motion.
This is Brian, so moved.
Thanks, Brian. So Brian Shepard moved, and a second.
Joe Bonell, move.
Joe Bonell seconded. Thank you very much. Beth, could you please do roll call?
Sure. Start with Indian Trails.
Sorry, yes, I went to a different screen. I was going over to my different screen. Sorry about that.
Lake Forest.
Yes.
Lake Villa.
Yes.
Morton Grove.
Okay.
Yes.
Niles.
Yes.
Northbrook.
Yes.
Palatine.
Yes.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
Prospect Heights.
Yep.
Wilmette.
Yes.
Winnetka.
Yes.
Zion.
Yes.
Algonquin.
Yes.
Carrie.
Yes.
Crystal Lake.
Yes.
Des Plaines.
Yes.
Ela.
Yes.
Evanston.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Glencoe.
Yes.
Glenview.
Yes.
Grays Lake.
Yes.
Highland Park. Highland Park. and Huntley.
Yes.
Thank you.
It looks like Highland Park is thumbs upping. I don't,
Okay,
maybe.
I was looking for the thumbs up. Thank you.
And Lauren just arrived from Fox River Valley.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Dennis.
All right, moving on to essential business. Obviously, pretty much all we're going to be talking about, which is all we get to talk about at our libraries, is COVID-19 and our response. So first, we have the update from Rails, IMLS, and other organizations. Rebecca included information on the packet about guidance from Rails and on the Realm study, as we shall now call it. Rebecca is talking on the phone with someone. I'm guessing someone is maybe having connection difficulties. So I wanted to just see if anyone there isn't any new information since we've released the packet, but I wanted to see if anyone had any questions on the updates that Rebecca included in the packet. Or Rebecca, since she's now off the phone, if you have anything additional you'd like to add. She's not ready yet.
I do not. I'm just sending Jim Schultz the meeting invite if
Okay.
I know how to do that.
Isn't it just at the top of the agenda?
Yes, he says he doesn't have it.
Okay, I can send it if you'd like.
Okay. Any questions on the updates? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on, and obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about in just a minute, but we thought it would be helpful to start by having Andy share with us what his experiences have been. As you may know, Glencoe started curbside delivery officially on Monday, but they did a soft open last week after getting a tremendous amount of pressure from his board. They kind of had no choice but to do this. So I'm going to let Andy talk a little bit about this and answer any questions before we dive into the recommendations from executive committee. So Andy, take it away.
Okay, thanks. I asked Beth and Rebecca to send out the summary and overview of what we're doing. So I won't really go in great detail into our procedure and process, but I will just kind of give an outline of what we've been doing since May 11th. So we, as Kate mentioned, we had not planned to do curbside until the building could reopen, even on a limited basis. But around May 1, we started making plans to begin curbside beginning on May 11th. And as Kate mentioned also, the first week of curbside was a soft launch. So it was not advertised. It was done only with the existing holds in place. We took about 2 days as a management team to hammer out a plan and a process for curbside. And then we presented it to our board at a May 7th committee of the whole meeting for discussion. Everything went okay at that point. Again, we went live yesterday, or 2 days ago now. The service right now is only available to Glencoe cardholders only. We have limited service hours to 4 hours a day. It's a bit of a staggered weekly schedule where Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays we go from 11 to 3, and Tuesdays and Thursdays we go 3 to 7. We are unable to do same-day service, so we've opted to do next day, which, as I'll get to a little bit later, it's not technically next day, but I'll get into that in a second. Right now with staffing, we did not call back our employees. We had a call for volunteers, and we made that call on May 8th. What we decided to do is we had hoped to schedule cohort teams that would only work exclusively with one another. We identified 4 positions for each day for curbside to manage curbside. 1 would be the call center, 2 would be runners, and 1 was, what we cheekily called the face, the person that hands off all the materials to those patrons. So we had 20 slots that we needed filled if we, so we couldn't repeat employees coming in more than 1 shift. And we had a nice callback. We had 16 staff members call back and volunteer for the curbside service. So one day of curbside is being manned by the management team. We were unable to do in-person training. So what we had to do is create how-to documentation, and we also did a short tutorial video for Calendly.com, which is the calendar program that we use to schedule all the pickups. What we learned was that we didn't need 2 runners even during the soft launch. So we shifted 1 person to call center. We started getting a lot more call volume than we had anticipated, even with just managing the existing holds for the first soft launch. In terms of safety, the library had been kind of stockpiling an inventory of masks, both disposable and washable, since we closed. Each employee received 5 washable cloth masks that they can take home. And staff are required to wear masks and gloves at all times while they're in the building. We don't ask staff to switch, so switch roles. So if you're on the call center, you're on the call center for the entirety of the shift. You will not be asked to handle materials, etc. And that's, as I said earlier, the summary, the overview that Beth and Rebecca sent out, that goes through a lot of the process of how we manage the service. A couple adjustments that we made after our soft launch is once it was advertised, our pick list to our standards was massive. We normally average between 75 to 80 items per pick list. On Monday, we had a list of 180 items. The runners are the ones that do the pick list, and we realized that we need to stagger them as well, and it would probably be best for safety precautions as well. So runners come in an hour before the start of service to manage the pick list. We also were trying to, what happened on Monday was patrons were calling in not only to schedule a pickup, but they were also seeking advisory. They were also asking if we could place holds for them, and we just could not manage the volume of calls for that. So what we did was we decided to kind of reset our advisory, because we do remote advisory via email, chat, and text. So now our advisory hours, remote advisory hours, mirror curbside hours. We also delegated the email notification, or email requests, patron hold requests, to one librarian that's working remotely as well. So every day he manages all the emails. So within about the first hour or so of going live on Monday, we opened up our email account and we had about 60 requests for holds. So that's what we're doing right now. We have signage outside by our staff lot. We first started with kind of like the stake signs, but what we realized was we needed a bigger sign, so we went out and purchased an A-frame. Patrons were also coming to the front entrance where it's still locked, so we had to put another A-frame out there. We've been collecting material. We've been collecting return materials. We have an interior book drop. So what we do right now is one staff member gets PPV'd up and removes all the materials, brings it to our program space where we have tables all set up, and it's all quarantined for a minimum of 3 days. At that point, after quarantine, the staff member will come back and pull one batch back and check them all back in and get them ready for circulation. Other than that, I can say that for our town, our demos we're about 8,700 people. We're a small community, and it's been very well received at this point. I can assure those that are planning or preparing to do curbside, I think your communities are going to be very happy to have it. I think the only other thing I could say is that one voice of recommendation would be just to make sure that you maintain some flexibility, because it can get, well, for us, it got extremely hectic on day one. And that's all I had. I don't know if we have time for Q&A or if that's what you guys.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of time to answer any questions people might have. I do want to recognize that Henry, so Jim Schultz, made it onto the call, so he is now here for Beth's attendance and roll call. Does anyone have any questions for Andy?
Yeah, I do. This is Tim from Evanston. Thanks, Sandy. What are the hours? Did you say the hours? I don't know if I caught that. Are you doing it Monday through Friday? Is there any evening or weekend hours? Because we're deep in the throes of planning and doing this in Evanston, but I'm getting some, talk back that we need to not just do it, during regular 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, that we want to maybe try to do evening and weekends. So are you doing evening and weekends at all?
Yeah, we go into the early evenings, Tim. We go up until 7 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we don't start until 3. We immediately decided we didn't want to do weekends. I think that would be, for us, it was difficult because we are trying to maintain, we're trying to minimize the number of staff that are in the building to do this. And we knew that with a Saturday, even if it were just for 4 hours on a Saturday, it would just be insane for us. And we wouldn't be able to provide proper service and a fluid service if we just maintain the 4-member teams for a day. But every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we start at 11 a.m. and we end at 3. And then again, Tuesday and Thursday, we start at 3 p.m. and we end at 7.
Andy, are you doing any limits on number of cards per card or cards per car or number of items checked out or type of items checked out or anything like that?
No, we're not, Molly, we're not putting any limits to cards per card or cards per vehicle, say that. And then we are asking that patrons check out only 5 adult items and 15 children items per card. But we're not really enforcing that a whole heck of a lot. I mean, it's actually kind of hard to manage that because we're going so quickly to fulfill these holes and get them out to the patron that we're not taking the time to check the card to see how many items there are. We just feel like that's more of a waste of time than anything. But we hope that, in terms of goodwill, that they just, manage the restriction on their own. But if not, we won't punish them for it.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, other questions for Andy? All right, Andy, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure that many of us will also have information to share as other people start offering curbside in the future. So let's dive in now to the recommendations from Executive Committee. Rebecca, did you want to just share the slides now or did we want, yeah, okay. Turn it over to Rebecca.
Did I screen share? I think I did it. Mm-hmm.
You sure did.
Yeah, so Kate, I mean, if you want to walk us through it, the slides are just a visual of where we are on
Sure.
the agenda. There's no secret stuff on them.
Okay, so we are going to talk about the Executive Committee recommendations. Next slide. No, I'm not going to do that. Rebecca's going to figure this out because she's really smart. So you may recall that at our last meeting, Rebecca posed 5 questions that we had a robust discussion on. Should all CCS libraries coordinate resuming hold pickup services? Should CCS have a system-wide quarantine period? Should the overdue notice delivery schedule change? Are CCS members required to honor pickup anywhere for curbside service? And then when Rails restarts delivery, will all CCS libraries participate in intra-CCS loan? Can libraries opt in one by one? And so from these, as we got more information, Rebecca created a series of 5 recommendations that went out to Governing Board like a week and a half ago. I'm losing all track of time.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, maybe? Yeah.
Friday the 8th, maybe?
Okay, so sometime in the past. And so these are the recommendations that Governing Board, not Governing Board, that Executive Committee discussed. So I'm going to just read through them.
These are the updated recommendations from executive committee. These are not my.
These are not the ones that were in the original memo. These are the updated ones, yes, because we did have some tweaks. So one, that CCS strongly recommends that in-person services, including curbside and delivery service, begin resuming in phase 3. Any services active in phase 2 should be deemed essential by the library. Originally, the recommendation was that in order to offer in-person services with CCS support, we were going to ask that boards vote on that, but we softened that language up a little bit. So this is the new recommendation. The second recommendation is that the returns of library materials are discouraged until phase 3. CCS will continue to bulk extend due dates as needed. The third recommendation was that CCS libraries will follow a shared quarantine period based on Rail's guidance until the Northeast region reaches phase 4, or new research calls for a revision to either the length of the quarantine period or the phases in which it is required. The CCS overdue notice schedule will be adjusted so the first overdue notice is sent an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period. This one was also updated from what Rebecca sent out on the 8th. And so we changed it. It used to say that the quarantine period would be 7 days because that was the Rails guidance we had just received, but we realized that guidance is changing, so we wanted to make a recommendation that was a little bit more fluid. And then in light of the fact that the recommendation for quarantining might be fluid, we felt like we couldn't specify a specific overdue notice schedule, but just that we would want to give it an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period. So that's why that recommendation is a little bit less definitive to give us some flexibility. The fourth recommendation is that the CCS policy regarding pickup anywhere for CCS patrons will be suspended until phase 4. Libraries may choose to offer services to CCS or non-CCS patrons. And then finally, all libraries will be required to participate in intra-CCS loan and delivery after delivery resumes, which again, we don't know when that will be, if either the Realm study provides compelling evidence that it is safe to do so, or the Northeast, North Central, and Central regions reach phase 4. And the reason we're not just looking at this from a Northeast perspective is that we exchange books with multiple regions. And so we wanted to capture all of that. If delivery is happening, we wanted to make sure that we were all in phase 4. So those are the recommendations that have come from executive committee. What we're going to do is go through them one by one and get feedback on each one, and we're going to vote on each one separately or adjust as needed and vote on any updated motions that might be needed. So we'll start by talking about the first one, which is that CCS strongly recommends that in-person services, including curbside and delivery service, begin resuming in phase 3. Any services active in phase 2 should be deemed essential by the library. So we're gonna, you know what, let's stop sharing for a minute so we can do a little discussion and then we can bring the recommendation back up. I had asked Rebecca to have them on the screen so that we could remember what the wording was, but I think it'll be more helpful to discuss a little and then bring it back up. So I wanted to see if there was any questions or discussion on this recommendation.
This is Diane McNulty. Are we guessing that phase 3 is starting June 1st?
We were not making a guess. We were assuming that that it would be sometime in June, but not necessarily that it would be June 1st.
This is the governor said yesterday that gave every indication he's opening phase 3 on May 30th.
Okay.
Okay, I missed the call yesterday.
Metrics are getting met, so I suspect that's true.
Yeah. But part of the reason that we left it aligned with the phases was that we're hoping to use this more long term. So if we reach phase 3 and then we go back to phase 2, we can have clear metrics for when we're doing different things.
I have a question.
Scott.
So you took out the requirement that it's the board that must deem it essential if you started before phase 3, but it still says the library must deem it essential.
Correct.
So who's deeming?
Well, it says the library should deem it essential. So there were different interpretations. The CCS attorney did feel that it was the governing body of the library that would have to be the one to make it an essential recommendation. But it sounds like individual library attorneys had different interpretations of that. And if that's something that could be, you know, an operational decision that the library director could make. So it is, the language has been changed so that it should be deemed essential by the library. And so that leaves it open either way.
Okay. Other questions or comments on the recommendation? Jeannie.
So I have two, and the first has to do with that deeming essential, I guess more of a comment from my perspective. I've been avoiding deeming something like curbside essential because phase 1 says that essential operations can happen. And if we get to a point in the fall or in the future where we're back in a phase 1, I do not want my public to say to me, you said curbside services are essential and you should be able to do those things now. So that's my concern about saying that something is essential. It does not allow me flexibility in the future. It's just my comment.
Yep.
And then my question as a newbie is, these recommendations, what kind of teeth are in these recommendations if I don't say deem something essential, or if I did start curbside service like Glencoe before June 1? What happens to me?
You're out. I'm just kidding.
I want my investment fee back.
So the original recommendation did have an enforcement mechanism, which was essentially that CCS wouldn't make any ILS changes for you. And that was changed at executive committee. At this point, the recommendation is really a question of liability protection for CCS, that we're saying, like, we don't think that you should do this in phase 1 or phase 2 based on, you know, the executive orders, et cetera, and are providing support for it, which we will do because we exist at the pleasure of governing board, is not an endorsement of that choice or that direction. It's really a liability, like a protection for CCS as an organization, giving the library that responsibility and accountability.
All right, Catherine, I think you had a question or comment.
I guess my question goes to, I have a philosophical question about why we are only talking about essential services in the sense of a physical realm. My board deemed library services essential. They didn't say which ones. So we have been doing essential library services since March 14th when we closed our building. We have been doing chat, reference, we've been issuing library cards online, we've been lending books, we've been increasing ebook purchases. So I feel like the minute we start to say that, we start paring out and saying this piece is essential rather than just saying library services are essential. And then it's up to each library to deem how, what they're putting in that bag of library services at what particular time, because my library's been essential since March, well, actually 17th, don't want to exaggerate. I feel we made that statement on day 1 that we were providing essential services.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I read this as any services active in phase 2 should be deemed essential. I don't think it parses out the virtual versus the physical.
But why would you make it why would you even tie it to a phase? Like, we weren't even in a phase. We were in phase 1 for a very long time and we were providing services.
I sort of agree with Catherine in the sense that, you know, part of the problem was, and the solution was, Rails, I believe, reached out to Ansel Glink, and Ansel Glink made an interpretation of the law during last month saying that libraries were essential, which kind of put us all into a different realm. So what I'm worried about are the legal ramifications of us declaring ourselves essential or not essential. And that seems to me to be between a library and its attorneys. And I don't want to put CCS out there, but why do you think you would have legal liability because your members essentially do what they want to do in terms of declaring or not declaring that things are essential?
Yeah, I think it's a relatively small risk, but I think that someone who was feeling litigious could make the argument that, like, let's say someone like you guys started, you never stopped in-person services, and in phase 1, you're circulating all the books. I don't know. And then, you know, there's an outbreak that's tracked back to the library and people are suing. And it's like, well, how, like, CCS is this other organization that enabled the libraries to, like, transfer this material around. Do I think it's a limited risk? Yes. Do I think it is a plausible? Also, yes. So the recommendation from executive committee is not to say which library services are essential or are library services essential, or that CCS is saying library services is essential. It's saying that CCS's interpretation of the governor's executive order, according to our attorney, is that as government agencies, any services offered in phase 1 or phase 2 are the essential services as deemed by those government agencies. This is not saying that, you know, virtual chat isn't essential or that ebook circulation isn't essential. It's saying that CCS sort of has direct control over the passing of stuff back and forth and the, like, giving of things, the giving of physical things to patrons, and that we recognize the executive order says that government agencies should be providing essential services in phase 1 and phase 2 and non-essential services in phase 3.
I can just make one little point of clarification. We are an Ansel Glink client. They never said that we are essential. What they said is every board has to make it for themselves what they think is essential. And the point here is, if you are going to, and following Executive Order 32, if you want to offer these services that get people out of their homes and put your staff into the building, then you are in essence saying that is an essential service in order to provide it during this phase. But they never said you had to do that. It is up to every board. I think what they were trying to clarify is people who are looking at the retail essential business model and saying that doesn't apply because you're government. And we never shut down. Government never shut down. They were very, very clear about that from day one. But what level of services you provide is up to your own individual board. It would have been nice, you know, I got a lot of friends that are teachers. It would have been nice if we had some kind of overarching clarification from the governor that included us, instead of leaving it up to every single board of trustees to make up their own mind, because it does put a lot of pressure on us and what our neighbors are doing. But again, Ansel Glink never said you had to do that. It's up to your board to decide.
There was a webinar and people were asking them, I'm sure everybody was on it, so are you saying we can do this right now? Can we start curbside right now? And the attorney for Ansel Glink was saying, well, yeah, because you're essential, you know. So Scott, I agree with you. It wasn't that they were deeming us all essential as if they had some superpowers, but I think what they were definitely communicating to the attendees were, nobody said you couldn't do curbside right now, you know, in May, because you know, no one said you weren't not essential, if I can say it like that. So I think that was some point of confusion because people thought that we were not allowed to open up our libraries at all.
But the other point of confusion is Ansel Glink is huge. They got a lot of attorneys and they don't all say the same thing.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like people feel that we shouldn't be starting curbside until phase 3. I haven't heard any comments on that, that we feel like that makes sense, and that if in If an individual board decides that they want to do that, then that is, of course, their right as a unit of local government. So I think, you know, right, like we're trying to figure all of this out as we go. I'd like to see, we have a recommendation from executive committee, which again, Rebecca, would you mind popping it back up on the screen?
Can I ask one question quickly before we do that?
Sure.
I'm very uncomfortable voting for a recommendation that throws at least 6 of our members out into the cold that are already, I think there's 6 already doing curbside. So
well, they're not throwing them out into the curb. What the recommendation is saying is that if you're offering curbside, it should be because it has been deemed essential, which I think that has happened. So I don't quite see it that way. I see it as just kind of like being a more accurate representation of what has already occurred.
I also have a comment that actually the way this says is in-person services, including curbside and delivery, begin resuming in phase 3. And one could interpret in-person services as meaning public allowed into the library.
So Kim, do you think that the language needs to be stronger to say, but libraries shall not reopen?
Well, I think what we're trying to get at is that curbside and other delivery type services is what we want to say is okay in phase 3. But when I look at this language and knowing that I've got board members who are like, well, why can't you open the building? You know, like they haven't been watching anything or listening to anybody. They could look at this and say, it says right here, in-person services, phase 3. I don't think that's the intent, but I think it could be read that way, that it in-person includes coming into the building.
Okay, I'm seeing people nodding. Do you have a recommendation for other wording that you would like to see?
How about just recommends that curbside and delivery service begin resuming and get rid of in-person services?
Okay, do people feel okay with that? If you could just kind of nod your heads or shake your heads, people feel good about that. Okay, so then
Does drive up count as curbside for those that have drive up windows?
What, Scott?
I'm sorry, if you have a drive up window, that should also be included then. Curbside, drive up, and delivery.
Okay, so what I'm hearing us say is that the motion should be CCS strongly recommends that drive up, curbside, and delivery service begin resuming in phase 3. Any services active in phase 2. Well, we could also, hang on, I'm gonna pause and redo this because I think that this might allay some of the other concerns. Okay, so CCS strongly recommends that drive up, curbside, and delivery service begin resuming in phase 3. Any drive up, curbside, and delivery services active in phase 2 should be deemed essential by the library. How do people feel about that? Sarah has a question.
Could we say CCS strong, I'm going to try and repeat what you said. CCS strongly recommends that in-person service, or not, CCS strongly recommends that curbside, drive-through, and delivery services not begin before phase 3?
I was going to say resume no earlier than.
Right. Just because we don't want it to flip to phase 3 and then have some library think, well, now we're in phase 3, I have to start this. Or CCS recommends I start this.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Okay, so here's what I have. Hang on, I'm typing it out so that I can make sure I'm not messing it up. Okay, so this is what I have now. Recognizing that we have not made any motions yet. So CCS strongly recommends that curbside, drive-through, and delivery service begin no earlier than phase 3. Any curbside, drive-through, and delivery services active in phase 2 should be deemed essential by the library. Rebecca's updating it on the screen. Do people feel more comfortable with this? Seeing nodding. Okay, so I would, oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so as Catherine said, if there are 6 of us that are already doing this, I'm not, I mean, not to be difficult, but what, why go through this? I mean, you know, it's not, what's the point of the recommendation?
Well, the point is for CCS to minimize their liability risk, and for the rest of us that have not started doing this to say, no, this is definitely something CCS is recommending that we not start doing. And if we move up a phase and have to move back a phase, it gives us a leg to stand on to say we shouldn't be doing curbside. So if we start doing curbside, we're in phase 3, we get to phase 4, and then, ooh, like, things get awful and we go back to phase 2, we have a reason to then stop doing that. Because I think inevitably, you know, we're all assuming that the phases are going to just happen one after another. I think we're definitely going back to earlier phases later this year based on all the projections that I've been seeing. So I think that's why, Lauren.
This is Diane. My board, because we were going by the previous recommendations, deemed that our reopening plans were essential, with the ability to make changes as needed or reverse the plan. And that was based on management team's recommendation. So I don't know, I agree, it kind of seems a little moot for us.
And I think for those libraries that, I mean, everyone can vote however they would like on this. I do think, though, that it has value. So I'm going to ask if...
So Kate, can
Ryan,
I chime in here real quick? So, you know, my reading of this recommendation is, I understand what's being asked for here, which is really from CCS's perspective. I don't think there's anything in this recommendation that stops a library from making individual decisions, local decisions that are relevant and for their community. So I support this recommendation as it is, and I would move approval of this recommendation as stated.
All right, great, thanks. So we have a motion to approve the recommendation from Brian Shepherd. Do I have a second?
Second, Pam Lutzler.
All right, thanks, Pam. I'm going to read the motion one more time, and then we'll have Beth do roll. So CCS strongly recommends that curbside, drive-through, and delivery services resume no earlier than phase 3. Any curbside, drive-through, and delivery services active in phase 2 should be deemed essential by the library. Beth, do we have any further discussion on the motion?
Hey, can I make one more comment, please?
Sure, Scott.
And again, everyone's attorney is going to say things differently, but when I specifically asked if our feet would be held to the fire if we deemed this essential and then circumstances change, and our attorney said, by no means should your board feel that they are locked in. They can always make a motion and reverse whatever action they take. So if we deem this as being essential for the purpose of greasing the wheels and getting this going before the governor officially declares this in phase 3, and not putting any liability on CCS, but then circumstances change, there's another outbreak in our community and they decide to go back on it, they have every right to go back on it. So to Jeannie's concern about being locked in, our attorney's opinion was you're not locked in. They can always change that. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Any other discussion? All right, Beth, could you please call roll? And I think Rebecca, if you want to stop the screen sharing for right now, that might make it easier.
I'll start with Fremont.
Yes.
Glencoe.
Yes.
Glenview.
Yes.
Grays Lake.
Yes.
Highland Park.
Yes.
Huntley.
Yes.
Indian Trails.
Yes.
Lake Forest.
Yes.
Lake Villa.
Yes.
McHenry.
Yes.
Morgan Grove.
Yes.
Niles, Maine.
Yes.
Northbrook.
Yes.
Palatine.
Yes.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
Prospect Heights,
Yep.
Round Lake,
Yes.
Wilmette,
Yes.
Winnetka,
Yes.
Zion,
Yes.
Algonquin,
Yes.
Cary,
Yes.
Crystal Lake,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Ela,
Yes.
Evanston,
Yes.
Fox River Valley.
No.
All right, great. So 1 down, 4 to go, guys. I hope you brought lunch. No, I'm just kidding. So the second recommendation is the returns of library materials are discouraged until phase 3. CCS will bulk extend due dates as needed. Any discussion on this recommendation from executive committee?
Could we have a show of hands of how many people are currently taking materials back or will take them back before May 30?
So about a third, it looks like.
Yeah. I'm sort of with Lauren on these, like people have already moved ahead of these. I see minimal liability for CCS, so I'll make a motion to bring this one to the table so we can vote on it.
Okay, great. Motion from Catherine Lemmer. Do I have a second?
You don't need a
Second.
Who was that?
You don't need a second.
It was Scott. Sorry, we were really quiet. Okay, so the motion on the table is that returns of library materials are discouraged until phase 3. CCS will bulk extend due dates as needed. Do we have any further discussion on the motion?
I'll just note that the goal of this recommendation is that patrons feel no pressure to return things earlier than phase 3, not that libraries cannot accept returns.
All right, Scott?
I would add the language like we did in the last one, the no sooner than, so that it doesn't sound like, okay, it's phase 3, now you have to take returns.
Okay, so then the wording would be returns of library materials are discouraged
Before.
beginning no earlier than phase 3? That doesn't sound right.
Phase 3.
Wait, what did you say, Sarah?
Then maybe just change until to before. Returns of library materials are discouraged before phase 3.
Oh, that wording is much better. Okay, so returns of library materials are discouraged before phase 3. CCS will bulk extend due dates as needed. Catherine, are you okay with the change to the wording?
Perfect, perfect. Move it
I've
on.
already forgotten who gave the second.
You don't need a second. It's a recommendation.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, it is a recommendation, but we just changed the wording. I know I did it wrong the first time, but since we changed the wording, then it means we need to do the motion in the second. So Scott seconded, he's okay with that. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? All right, Beth, could you please call roll?
I'll start with Lake Forest,
Opposed.
Lake Villa,
Sorry, I forgot that I was like, yes.
Welcome, Matt.
McHenry,
Oh,
You just muted yourself, Jim.
opposed? No.
thank you. Morton Grove,
Yes.
Niles Main,
No.
Northbrook,
Yes.
Palatine,
No.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
Prospect Heights,
No.
Round Lake,
No.
Wilmette,
No.
Winnetka,
Yes.
Zion,
Yes.
Algonquin,
Yes.
Cary,
No.
Crystal Lake, sorry, Kim, I think you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Des Plaines,
No.
Ela,
Yes.
Evanston,
Yes.
Fox River Valley,
No.
Fremont,
Yes.
Glencoe,
Yes.
Glenview,
Yes.
Grays Lake,
Abstain.
Highland Park,
Yes.
Huntley,
Yes.
Indian Trails.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to give Beth a minute to count.
Thank you. I have 10 no's. 1 abstain, so we got 16 yes.
All right, motion carries. Moving on to the third recommendation, and Rebecca, would you mind pulling this one back up on the screen just because it's a long one?
Good.
Yes. So CCS libraries will follow a shared quarantine period based on Rails guidance until the Northeast region reaches phase 4, or new research calls for a revision to either the length of the quarantine period or the phases in which it is required. The CCS overdue notice schedule will be adjusted so the first overdue notice is sent an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the wording on this was slightly different when Rebecca sent the original recommendation out on May 8th. We wanted to not just go based on the existing Rails guidance of the 7 days, but give ourselves some flexibility with what we should be doing. Obviously, we also do not yet have information on what Rails will be requiring once delivery starts. And I do think that that will play a big role in this. So this is more so that we can all rest assured that we're all following the same guidance and quarantining for the same amount of time. To help with not only safety, but also once delivery starts, what that will mean, and ensuring that we're all kind of holding things for the same length of time. So I'm going to leave this up and just ask for comments, and then we can take it down in a minute so that we can see each other.
This is Andy. I'm wondering if the recommendation needs further clarification as to saying that the Rails guidance will be supported by actual research / data. I have some concerns about moving forward with any sort of blanket quarantine period, and this is totally singular to my library because of our facilities and the amount of staff that we can bring in. But a recommended quarantine of 7 days would be pretty catastrophic for us. It would be really hard for us to manage that in our space and with our staffing. It probably obviously has to do because we're, if not the smallest, one of the smallest libraries in the consortium. But we would certainly be willing to follow said guidance from Rails so long as Rails can back that up with some sort of actual data and research.
Other thoughts?
I think our challenge is that there is no quarantine period, that where the verb precedes it is shall, which in legal terms is there is no wiggle room. All the information we're getting is, well, it could be this, it could be that. And so I'm not sure we know exactly what the quarantine period is that we shall follow.
It's also my understanding Rails has already recommended a 7-day quarantine, and we will not be getting any data from the Realm study until at least August. So we can't wait for that to right now. We have to make a decision based on the information that is available to us at this moment, and which we can always change later if we get more information. But Rails has already said 7 days.
So Molly, I'm going to just clarify. So the phase 1 of the realm study lasts from May to August. And so they're hoping for preliminary results sooner than August, but August is kind of the time when they're expecting like final results. But I know Rails, speaking with Dee, they're hoping to get some preliminary recommendations, or at least a quarantine recommendation. There's going to be a ton of other recommendations coming down the road. So I think it's possible, but you're right. We definitely don't have the information now. And that is challenging. I do want to remind everyone that Rebecca did also cite the Lancet study in the board packet, which is what Rails used to prefer their guidance on the 7-day quarantine. So what are other people's thoughts?
I know that the attorneys and CCS are trying to, CCS's attorneys and CCS is a concern about kind of a CYA, for CCS. I don't think there's any, the first sentence is what bothers me in this. I think what we want to focus on is, the overdue notices and that sort of service that CCS may be providing to all of us. In terms of what we're doing with our quarantine, there is no expectation that CCS establishes those guidelines for us individually or tries to police them. And so to agree to this kind of first statement is, just a meaningless action because it's not enforceable. We're all going to have to make our own decisions based on what we believe is right. And we're really the ones that are going to be held liable. And in terms of lawsuits, if somebody files a lawsuit, it doesn't matter what disclaimer you have in there. If they want to sue everybody in the world, they will do it.
For sure. I mean, I also think that there's another piece of this, Kim, that's really important, and that is that we are a group of almost 30 libraries. Everyone is trying to figure this stuff out on their own. And if we make recommendations as a group, we will be that much stronger and be able to communicate that to our community, that we are not making decisions in a bubble, that we are making decisions in concert with other people, and that we're doing it together. So like, my favorite blog is Ask a Manager by Allison Green. If you're not familiar, it's really awesome. And one of the things that she constantly recommends is band together as a group and go discuss this issue. And I think that's exactly what we're seeking to do here. We are seeking to make a decision as a group so that we can stand by each other and help each other, so that we don't have to have people like poor Andy, whose board kind of threw him under the bus, having to make that decision. Sorry, Andy, I know. You don't have to say anything. I'm going to just say it. And so like, it will make us that much stronger and help us with all of these decisions that we are making, not only with our community, but with our boards and with our communities. And I just think that that's really important. There's, of course, also, I think, the liability, which I think is minimal, but is still there. And I think that that is really helpful because it shows that we're being thoughtful, but also working together. So that's my take on it. Scott.
I agree with what Kim said as far as this being the most unenforceable action we can take, because everyone's already doing different things with returns. But it's kind of moot. It's a moot point until Rails begins delivery, because if we quarantine for 24 hours, the only people that are going to get their hands on those books are our own patrons via our own Curbside. You guys can't get any of our material, so there's no worry. Or if we, I'm pushing for no returns until I have more information, but whenever Glencoe or anybody else gets their books back in, it's not going to have any impact on us until the interlibrary loan deliveries begin. So this is, I kind of don't see the point of this motion.
Yeah, I think that, Scott, you raise a really good point. This This motion is really about when delivery restarts and material is going back and forth. This is, and I agree with Kim, this is not a liability issue for CCS. This is just this is more of a safety issue for the material that's all passing between libraries. So, you know, if Kate's library chooses to do no quarantine and Ela's
Throw it all open.
doing it all, and Ela's doing a week-long quarantine, just it feels like sending the materials back and forth in that way would complicate things for everyone else. I'm going to say a thing that is going to sound scary, but I don't mean it to. At this point, Rails, at the last time I talked to Rails, they were recommending when delivery restarts to quarantine before stuff goes in the bin, like before delivery gets picked up, that they wanted it to quarantine for 7 days. And then they were further recommending a 7 days after that delivery got to your library before those materials were handled. That's a lot. I hope that's not what happens. I hope the research shows that like a day or no days or whatever. But I think that the idea that the reason that they're recommending it on both ends is because everybody's stuff is going in these bins together once delivery restarts. So if, you know, one library is being really vigilant and the other's not, that vigilant library's got to have that both sides component. Whereas if everybody agrees to do the quarantine, maybe that both sides isn't required. I don't know. We're not at the point where delivery is going to restart yet. I agree that this is not an issue until that time, but it is something that I think we need to be thinking about as a group, not for CCS as an organization, but for your libraries and your patrons and those people who are going to be handling the material. This is an area where I think a group decision benefits individual libraries and not necessarily CCS. I also agree that it's unenforceable, but that's where, you know, you all being the board and agreeing that what the board agrees is what happens moving forward is what happens moving forward. But yes, I agree with both Kim and Scott.
So
Jim.
Oh, I have a question. I thought that the purpose of this was to provide a buffer period between the time that something is checked in and when it actually says available. But so am I incorrect?
Well, you shouldn't be checking anything in until after the quarantine because you don't want your staff interacting with the items.
If we have something that comes in through the automated handling system, I thought that it would be checked in and then there would be a quarantine buffer that wouldn't allow anything to happen so that we could, you know, put stuff in a particular area and quarantine it. We're not sanitizing anything like Rockford.
If you're asking if Polaris will like enforce a quarantine period, it will not. As soon as an item is checked in, whether through an AMH or manually checked in, Polaris starts a series of triggers. So it's going to fill the holds, etc. So CCS's operational recommendation, which is not what we're voting on, we're recommending that libraries do not check in until after the quarantine period, and then we can add messaging to PowerPack and other places to let patrons know those items will stay on their account.
Got it. Thanks. I was just operating under an incorrect assumption, and sorry.
Yep.
I think also, I mean, Jim, I would talk to the other people that have AMHs, because my understanding was the recommendation was to not be using those right now. But I think that can be an offline discussion. So if anyone has one that has that research, maybe share that with Jim. Or I might be totally wrong and there might be new guidance. I haven't been following that because we don't have one. All right, so
should the motion be changed just to say once Rails delivery resumes, we will follow a shared quarantine period?
Would people be comfortable with that? I'm seeing nodding. Okay, so then Rebecca, do you mind bringing it back up and we'll just kind of adjust that and see if we have a motion in a second?
I'm working on it.
Sure, take your time.
We got nowhere to be. I'm just kidding. We have places to be.
Yes, at home. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so the motion would be when Rails delivery service resumes, CCS libraries will follow a shared quarantine period based on Rails guidance until the Northeast region reaches phase 4 or new research calls for a revision to either the length of the quarantine period or the phases in which it is required. The CCS overdue notice schedule will be adjusted, so the first overdue notice is sent an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period. Would someone be willing to make this motion?
Sarah Brown.
Thanks, Sarah. And a second.
This is Diane, I'll second.
Thanks, Diane. Do we have any further discussion on this recommendation?
Hey, do you think we need that, the second part of that first sentence? Is it just when service delivery resumes, then we'll follow the quarantine period that Rails is establishing, and not related to any phases? Because that what is triggering this action is Rails determining it's appropriate to resume delivery. It just feels like until the Northeast region, from then on, it felt like it was now unrelated. Personally.
I feel like we still need it because it's saying that we're going to be listening to the Restore Illinois plan and to the Realm study guidance, which might change things. So I personally find it helpful to have that in there.
My
Molly.
question would be are we going to be listening to the state of Illinois over the Realm study?
No.
Then maybe the Northeast region phase 4 portion is really not relevant.
Well, I think phase 4, I should say, if they said tomorrow, like, delivery is fine, it's all good, like, start, we would say, no, we're waiting for this study. I think we have to give ourselves the flexibility because information is changing so rapidly. So I think we need to have both in there because as new information comes, we want to give ourselves the flexibility. Like right now, if tomorrow the state said, start delivery, I would be like, no thanks, I'm out. But if we're in phase 4, where things could look very, very different. So I do think it is still helpful to have both in there.
I was wondering if phase 4 is premature. Frankly, I think there's still a fair amount of virus around in phase 4. It's phase 5 where life kind of gets back to normal. That's my thinking.
Yeah, I don't disagree that taking out the phase I said that real weird. I have no problem taking out the phase 4 reference and focusing on
the Realm study.
Yeah, what the research calls for in terms of the quarantine period, right? Because to Susan's point, like maybe it's phase 5, maybe we quarantine.
Okay, yeah.
Forever. I don't know.
Okay, so why don't you do your screen magic and then I'll read it again, seeing if. Okay, so then it would instead read, when Rails delivery service resumes, CCS libraries will follow a shared quarantine period based on Rails guidance until new research calls for a revision to either the length of the quarantine period or the phases in which it is required. The CCS overdue notice schedule will be adjusted so the first overdue notice is sent an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period. Sorry guys, my brain is broken. I don't remember who motioned and seconded, but if you could confirm if you're okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Any further discussion on this recommendation? I do want to point out that because we're not doing a shared quarantine period right now, we have just created a tremendous amount, and we haven't voted on this yet, but we are now creating a tremendous amount of work for CCS in terms of the overdue notices, aren't we? Because now everyone's going to be quarantining and wanting separate overdue notices, so we really still need to have a shared overdue notice schedule, right?
Yes, I would say that the overdue notice schedule will follow the Rails recommendations in general. That's a good point.
Well, didn't you
Right.
say overdue notices go out after they're checked in? And if we, well, Jim might not be doing it,
No,
but.
they go when it's 7 days overdue for the first overdue notice.
Oh, okay.
Right now
So if
it's
you're-
3 days.
Oh, 3 days, sorry. So if you're quarantining, so can we all agree that the overdue notices, regardless of whether you're quarantining for 3 days or 7 days, should go out 10 days after an item is overdue moving forward? Is anyone quarantining longer than 7 days?
Not so far.
Don't know yet. Because we're not accepting returns.
Or do we give CCS the authority to determine an appropriate length of time, and that we cede that authority to Rebecca, which I think is the right thing to do based on she'll have the most information, so that it isn't then, you know, we work so hard to get shared overdue notices, we do not want to move back from them. So Rebecca updated things. I'm going to just read the second part. So it says the CCS overdue notice schedule will be adjusted so the first overdue notice is sent an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period recommended by Rails.
All right, and we understand for right now Rails is recommending 7 days. They may change that, but right now
Correct.
it's 7 days. So theoretically, if this went into effect now, it would be the 10 days that you talked about. That's when the overdue notice would issue, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And this really only kicks in after CCS stops bulk extending due dates.
Yes, right now due dates
Correct.
are extended to July 1, so nobody should be getting overdue notices.
That's a very good point, Sarah. Okay, I'm going to read it one more time and then ask Beth to do roll call. When CCS delivery service resumes, CCS libraries will follow a shared quarantine period based on Rails guidance until new research calls for a revision to either the length of the quarantine period or the phases in which it is required. The CCS overdue notice schedule will be adjusted so the first overdue notice is sent an appropriate amount of time after the quarantine period recommended by Rails. All right, Beth, could you please call roll?
Start with Grays Lake,
Yes.
Highland Park. Sorry, I can't see thumbs.
Oh, Rebecca, would you mind unsharing? That way,
Oh.
Beth.
Yes, I do not mind doing that. Sorry.
Yes, Highland Park.
Thank you. Huntley,
Yes.
Indian Trails,
Yes.
Lake Forest,
Oh, she had to leave at 11.
thanks. Lake Villa,
Yes.
McHenry,
Yes.
Morton Grove,
Yes.
Niles Main,
Yes.
Northbrook,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
Prospect Heights,
Yeah.
Round Lake,
Yes.
Wilmette,
Yes.
Winnetka,
Yes.
Zion,
Yes.
Algonquin,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Crystal Lake,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Ela,
Yes.
Evanston,
Yes.
Fox River Valley,
Yes.
Fremont,
Yes.
Glencoe,
Yes.
and Glenview.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're 60% done with the recommendations. So the next recommendation is the CCS policy regarding pickup anywhere for CCS patrons will be suspended until phase 4. Libraries may choose to offer services to CCS or non-CCS patrons. Thoughts? Questions? All right, hearing none, I would, since we have a recommendation from Executive Committee, we just need a motion to approve the recommendation that the CCS policy regarding pickup anywhere for CCS patrons will be suspended until phase 4. Libraries may choose to offer services to CCS or non-CCS patrons.
This is Brian, so moved.
Thanks, Brian. So Brian Shepherd moved, and a second, please.
We don't need one.
Oh, God, I just did it. And I even wrote a note to myself to not do that. Damn it. Okay, any discussion? Okay, Beth, could you please call roll?
I will start with Park Ridge.
Yes.
Prospect Heights,
Yeah.
Round Lake,
Yes.
Wilmette,
Yes.
Winnetka. Sorry, Winnetka? You're muted.
I think Emily froze. Maybe come back to her.
She froze. Will do. Zion,
Yes.
Algonquin,
Yes.
Cary,
Yes.
Crystal Lake,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Ela,
Yes.
Evanston,
Yes.
Fox River Valley,
Yes.
Fremont,
Yes.
Glencoe,
Yes.
Glenview,
Yes.
Grays Lake,
Yes.
Highland Park,
Yes.
Huntley,
Yes.
Indian Trails,
Yes.
Lake Villa,
Yes.
McHenry,
Yes.
Morton Grove,
Yes.
Niles,
Yes.
Northbrook,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
and we'll try Winnetka again.
I
think she.
Yeah, I think she's relogging back in, I'm guessing. Okay, so we'll move on to, unless did Emily just make it back on? We'll give Emily a second. Hey, Emily, welcome back. Would you would you like to vote on the motion for Pick Up Anywhere?
My vote is yes. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Can't help the technology. Okay, so we are on recommendation number 5. All libraries, you know what, Rebecca, this one's long too. Do you mind bringing this one up?
On it.
Brilliant. Okay, all libraries will be required to participate in intra-CCS loan and delivery after delivery resumes if either the realm study provides compelling evidence that it is safe to do so, or the Northeast, North Central, and Central regions reach phase 4. I'm sorry I'm having so much trouble talking today, guys. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the recommendation?
I feel like this one raised some confusion at executive committee, so I'll just clarify.
Mostly by me. I was the one that was confused.
So CCS had originally been saying like Rails is not going to start delivery until after they have the results of the realm study. They're not going to do delivery until they know it's safe. So like when that happens, all CCS libraries will have to get back on board with delivery. But based on the revised timeline for the realm study and the library's timelines for reopening, Rails probably will start delivery before the realm study is completed. So it does raise some sort of like safety questions. And what this motion is intending to say is that once Rails delivery starts, libraries won't be required to participate, but they can opt in to do so unless the realm study says, yeah, delivery, no problem, let's do it, quarantine period, we're all set. Or we get to delivery restarts like, and we're in phase 4. So the intention here is to kind of put a buffer, so we're not saying like libraries never have to participate in delivery again, but also recognizing that there is still shifting evidence out in the universe, and you know, different communities may be taking more conservative or less conservative approaches.
And so from my perspective, I feel like we should be in lockstep with this. So like if Rails starts delivery before the realm study provides evidence or we're in phase 4, I feel like we as a group can say, nope, no thanks, we're good. Because I think it would be very confusing if Rails starts and individuals decide, one by one to offer that. And so that's where my confusion was, because like I really think that with delivery, we all need to be on the same page and agreeing, and that my hope is that Rails will, you know, wait until that study, but as Rebecca pointed out, that might not be the case. So like I almost feel like the recommendation could be added to say, well, only all libraries will be required to participate, but will only participate in delivery if these things are also there. So it's kind of like a double thing.
Kate, in this case, I agree with you that we need to band together, because if, going back to some of this other, if Rails is saying there has to be quarantining, you know, multiple times, but we're going to go ahead and start it back up, is that, you know, we want to be able to say, well, no, what you're trying to put on us is not possible. And so we're not going to play.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Other thoughts?
Well, I'd be completely shocked if Rails went ahead and started delivery before the study was in, especially since they're part of the study. But I don't hear people talking about Rails can't make a unilateral decision. They have a third-party partner to work with. And it's that delivery company that take on a tremendous amount of the risk, because their drivers have to handle the materials, and then they go back to their sorting center. So we're talking about our own, you know, methods and processes here, but there's an entire other third-party company that has, I'm sure, major liability concerns from the private sector that also has to be part of this equation. So I'd be really shocked if Rails made any unilateral decision. They have to have this partner, and I assume that partner is going to want to have some assurances as well.
I would presume so.
This is Diane. Not only that, the assurances, but they need to have some process in place to guarantee that they're not contaminating things.
Yep. Well, and I think that's where the initial recommendation that Rebecca talked about was like, we're going to quarantine 7 days on either end, so that if they can't guarantee 100% safe handling by CTS, that we're still okay.
Yeah, I don't want to imply that like Rails is just willy-nilly opening delivery. I think that they are taking a very cautious approach, but that there are indications that delivery could begin in June, and we should discuss how we want to handle that. Like, I recognize that libraries may not be in a place to accept delivery in June, and I do think that Rails, when they restart, it will not be mandatory to participate in delivery from Rails. So I wanted to give that same flexibility for CCS. That said, if CCS as a group wants to say we're not going to do delivery until phase 4 or phase 5 or whenever, like, I'm not gonna like I'm not gonna argue against that.
Yeah. Rebecca, could you stop sharing, and then that way we can.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure if other people are raising their hands and I can't see them. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments on whether we as a group should just say we're going to decide when we restart delivery and we'll all restart it together?
Maybe that's a more simple way to phrase the question. Should CCS decide that delivery will not start until we're all in favor, and not throw in all these other factors?
I'm seeing like no nodding or shaking of heads, so I'm unclear.
I think that's a good idea, Scott, because I think part of the problem now is all of us see the words phase 4 and our eyes are glazing over, because we don't, right now, it doesn't seem like we're ever going to get there. So it seems like we're really, really premature in some ways about talking about Rails delivery. So we're, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of tea leaf reading on our part. So I think Scott's proposal is great, because it just shows that in concept we're all agreed with each other, but the details are just seem too far off for us to be able to make a decision based on fact. It's just on, on guesswork so far.
Would we require that decision be unanimous among all CCS libraries?
I don't have the bylaws. Like, can we do that, Rebecca? Or Alex, parliamentarian person? Oh, he's talking on the phone.
Yeah. I don't know.
Alex,
Hold
you're
on.
muted.
I don't know what he just said.
I don't know. Anyone back in?
I mean, I would think if the governing board vote, I mean, I guess the governing board could vote to say that this thing is going to require 100% agreement. But there is nothing in our bylaws that ever requires 100% vote. The most sort of stringent is like the new members and budget, I think both have to be 2/3 of all members. Yeah, I think perhaps Sarah's hinting at a concern that one library could hold up all members. You know, I had a great conversation with a staff member earlier this week that was concerned because their library is in, you know, kind of a hot spot and responsible for a lot of the cases in their county, like a pretty high percentage. So, you know, if that library didn't want to start delivery because they felt like that would be a risk, I wouldn't want to see them holding up everybody else if everyone else felt like they were ready. I love group decisions. I feel a little bit torn here. And I wouldn't want to, all of the recommendations that I have tried to write have been to urge a conservative approach, but not require anyone to do something before they were ready. So that would be my only concern.
I think Rebecca has a really good point, because there could be something going on locally, maybe not in the community, maybe the library has an outbreak and, you know, all the staff are sent home, and, you know, so the chances of all of us 100% being able to do something is risky.
What about wording it as CCS, the CCS Governing Board will make the determination when we are willing to start accepting deliveries again? So that kind of puts it like individual libraries, like we can say as a group, we're all going to say no deliveries until there are people that want to do deliveries, so that I'm just worried that if it does start doing deliveries sooner, that this is just going to be not great. That was not really well worded at all. So I'm not sure how to word it.
How about we don't accept deliveries any sooner than, kind of like we were saying before, a couple of the other motions, no sooner than
Phase 4
conditions are met, but it's up to each library to determine if they are ready, willing, and able to participate.
So this is, I'm gonna just type something really quick because I like, Scott, what you just said.
What's the danger in just tabling this until we get more information? You know, like, I think that's part of the problem, is that we don't, it's too far off in the future.
But it also might not be.
I mean, do you really think Rails would, you know, in 2 or 3
I
weeks
didn't.
say, here we go? I mean, is that?
Given how quickly things are changing, I didn't think that there was a chance that phase 3 was going to be June 1st, but yet here we are. So I don't think we can make any assumptions that I think things are either going to move really slow or really fast, but the more we can prep for at least giving us some strategies to, move towards will help. Okay. Scott, I'm trying to capture what you said, so let me know if I came even close. CCS libraries will not resume delivery before phase 4 or unless the realm study provides compelling evidence that it is safe to do so.
Yeah, but then the original motion was trying to be inclusive. Do we want to put in then a word that it's up to each individual library to determine if they are able to participate?
Well, I mean, I think we're saying, guys, we're not going to do delivery in phase 3. And even if Rails starts delivery, we're going to wait. And then when we get closer to phase 4, we can kind of make an additional recommendation. To Joe's point, like it's too hard to plan for everything.
When's our next governing board meeting?
Well, that is a question. One of the things I was going to ask in my report was whether we wanted to have a June meeting. I think that we should, not just because I want one more chance to run another meeting until it's Sarah's in charge, but because I think that stuff is changing so quickly that I think I think we should schedule one, and then if we don't need it, we can cancel it. Otherwise, we're looking at July. And I think that would be too late.
Scott, are you suggesting that if we had a motion that just was more like CCS libraries will not do delivery, like to Joe's point, like we table it to the next meeting, but the motion is saying that we're not going to do delivery until we talk about it again.
Yeah, I mean, that would keep anyone from jumping the gun, because I think it's the pressure that neighboring libraries will get. Somebody else is doing it and we're not, so that's where the unification is handy. But I didn't think about the fact that maybe some of us have a outbreak and we don't want to subject anyone else to our materials as opposed to accepting other people's materials. So yeah.
How about this? CCS libraries will not resume delivery until we discuss at the next governing board meeting.
I'm just thinking about how I'm going to take that back to my staff. So say Rails delivery starts in 3 weeks and we have a whole bunch of stuff that needs to go back to Schaumburg. So like, am I supposed to tell my staff, even though that truck is going to come to our building every day, we're not putting anything on it?
Correct.
And they're going to ask me why. And I'm going to say,
and we're going to say, because we don't have enough studies to know whether or not we can handle these materials safely. And so we are exercising an abundance of caution to ensure that neither our staff or patrons get sick.
And then our staff is going to say, well, then why is Rails doing delivery service if we really know so little?
And
you don't have to have them come to your library.
Yeah, you can cross it. You can sign out and say no delivery until further notice in Rails, like you do for any emergency closing.
Right, but aren't they also going to say, well, wait, why are we checking in our own materials then after 7 days?
Because we know that we can control what is happening with our own materials. We can't control items coming from other libraries. We don't know how they're handling them. That's what I would say.
I mean, I guess I just have trouble thinking that Rails, who I feel is also being very conservative in their approach, why would they restart service if there weren't parameters in place to do it safely? I feel like if they can't figure out that they could do it safely, they're not going to start doing it. And so if they determine we can do delivery safely, we can put parameters and timelines in place, and require libraries to, quarantine for this many days or whatever it is they're going to decide or recommend or whatever. It's hard for me to say then, just don't send the truck to my library, even though you think we can do this safely.
So I think one of the reasons, at least for me, when I've talked this over with my staff, is that if Rails does have the recommendation that they had floated to the consortium managers of quarantining 7 days on either end, I don't know that I want my materials going away for like 3 weeks before a patron even gets it, and then another 3 weeks. I would almost rather keep it localized. And I think until we know what that recommendation is, which I think we would get, even if we get 2 weeks notice, I mean, we'll get at least 2 weeks notice for delivery. So even if we have a meeting the 3rd week in June, that would still give us time. If Rails recommendation makes sense and they want to start it and we have good things, we can decide as a group like, oh, do we want to do essentially a 14-day quarantine for every item? Is that the most effective way that we're using our resources? And I think because we don't know that, it's best just to hit pause and say, well, we're going to just wait, but we're just going to decide in case something happens quickly that we're not going to move forward with anything.
Okay, I guess I would like to hear the motion again then.
We could always have an emergency meeting too if something came up quickly. It's not that hard for us to
More
get together
meetings.
into a Zoom meeting.
Scott, you're a glutton for punishment. I like it. Okay, so the motion, which we haven't made, like it isn't official yet, right? Because no one has motioned for it, but the wording is CCS libraries will not resume delivery until we discuss at the next governing board meeting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Rails indicated that they would have like a phase 1 of reintroducing delivery, which would be to just like send stuff back to its owning libraries. So would this motion preclude libraries from participating in that return of their own stuff? I don't think it will happen in the next 3 weeks, but like it's possible that it would, and I wouldn't want, I feel like that's different. Like getting your own stuff back to quarantine and deal with is different than like sending stuff back and forth.
I think that's a very good point. Okay, so here's what I just wrote. CCS libraries will not resume delivery until we discuss at the next governing board meeting, but may participate in getting materials returned to their home libraries.
By Rails.
By Rails. Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, man.
Would non-CCS libraries be demanding that we send their stuff back to them?
Well, I mean, if Rails is picking it up, Rails will deliver it to non-CCS libraries, so yeah.
Yeah, but you just said we weren't going to have the van come to our building.
So the wording is, I'm going to just read it again. CCS libraries will not resume delivery until we discuss at the next governing board meeting, but may participate in getting materials to their home libraries by Rails.
Yeah, so so I think that Rails was going to send, you're going to have 2 weeks notice, but Rails is going to send trucks to each library to pick up what you have, take it back to the sorting facility, and then the next week come and drop everything back at its owning library, regardless of where it was originally set in transit to.
And then we hit pause.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm seeing lots of nodding heads, which is reassuring. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to say that CCS libraries will not resume delivery until we discuss at the next governing board meeting, but may participate in getting materials returned to their home libraries by Rails. Anyone?
So moved, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. So Alex Todd moved, and a second.
Jim, second.
All right, Jim DiDonato seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, Beth, do you want to do roll again?
I'd love to.
Won't that be fun?
Yes. I will start with Prospect Heights.
Sure.
Round Lake,
Yes.
Wilmette,
Yes.
Zion. Sorry. Winnetka.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm skipping libraries now. How about Winnetka?
Yes.
Thank you. And Zion.
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. Algonquin,
Yes.
Cary,
Yes.
Crystal Lake,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Gila,
Yes.
Evanston,
Yes.
Fox River Valley,
Yes.
Fremont,
Okay.
Glencoe,
Yes.
Glenview,
Yes.
Grays Lake,
Yes.
Highland Park, Highland Park, Huntley,
Yes.
Indian Trails,
Yes.
Lake Villa.
Yes.
Lake Forest is a yes.
Thank you, Catherine. McHenry,
Yes.
Morton Grove,
Yes.
Niles,
Yes.
Northbrook,
Yes.
Palatine,
P.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, guys, we made it through all 5 motions. Thanks, everyone. So moving on, we have the CCS member update, which the next one is Thursday, May 28th at 11. It will be recorded and shared via CCS News for those who are unable to attend. Rebecca, did you want to mention anything else with the member update?
We'll be going over these recommendations at that time. I mean, I strongly encourage you to share them with your staff before that, but we'll be talking more about libraries reopening, and we'll cover this stuff and take additional questions at that time.
I'm sorry, can you say the date and time of that again?
May 28th at 11 a.m.
Thank you.
Rebecca, will you be able to send us those, what we just passed in the revised wording out today so that
Yes.
we're all, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, that would be
when we log off.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to reports. We already kind of started touching on this, but I did want to ask everyone if we thought a June meeting is likely, given the recommendation we just did. I feel like we should schedule one. We can always cancel it if necessary. Does anyone disagree? Okay, great. So Beth and Rebecca will get back to us on time. I think keeping it on a Wednesday morning makes sense. Probably well, we'll figure that out. And so I'm going to still thank the outgoing executive committee members. Well, yeah, no, I'm going to still thank them even though we're going to have a June meeting, because in case we don't have it. So I wanted to thank Alex Todd for his years as president-elect, president, and now past president. He's now going to just become a member again. But you still have to answer parliamentary questions, Alex. That's ongoing. And I also want to thank Andy Kim for his role on the governing board, specifically as treasurer, and thank him for all of his service. So reminder that the new fiscal year with the new governing board starts July 1. So we will have our new members and our new president, Sarah Murray, starting then. So I also wanted to recognize, although he kind of did it himself, Mick Jacobson started last week at, I almost said the Zion Benton Library, that's wrong, at the Lake Villa Public Library. So congratulations, Mick. We're excited for you. And I just want to say that it has been fun. I look forward to yielding the torch to Sarah and just sitting back. As you guys know, I'm not typically very quiet, so that will still continue. But Sarah will do, I know, a phenomenal job. So you stuck with me for possibly one more meeting, but we'll see. And that is all I have for reports. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned at 11:45 a.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.